Good morning.
Good morning.
Pleased to have with us a lady of many parts, author, chartered accountant, mother, and also does many other interesting things which we'll discover as we go along. Pleased to introduce to you Poorvi Kalluri Pawar. Thank you, Poorvi, for joining us today.
Thank you for
look
having
forward to
me.
an interesting conversation with you. There are so many facets about what you're doing today, which I'd like to cover during the course of this conversation. So, Poorvi, maybe for the benefit of our audience, if you could do a quick, you've done many things, right? You're a CA, a CPA, you worked in the US, came back to India, and now you work with RCCM, right? Maybe you could just very quickly, for the benefit of our audience, talk them through your life journey.
Yeah. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me, MSR. So yeah, my name is Poorvi. I think one of the most interesting aspects of myself is that I've grown up in different parts of India and I love the diversity of this country. I'm a chartered accountant and CPA, so all of my professional experience has been in the finance field. I have a lot of hobbies. I like to sing and dance and read and write. I'm a mother of two beautiful girls, and we also have our pet Labrador for the last 3 years. So life is busy and exciting. It's taken many, turns. I've worked in the US, but most of my work experience has been in Hyderabad. And I think I'm very happy to have written a book which is sort of like an homage to the city, right? So, yeah, and I'm here today, very excited to be at the Tea Hub.
Sure. So, Poorvi, this is your first book,
Yes.
right? And so it's about a topic which is particularly dear to us at Tea Hub. It's all about entrepreneurship, and it's a fabulous read because I think you try to bring out many facets of the city, about how the city has transitioned over the last many years. You interviewed a combination of people who built businesses back in the 70s and 80s, and to people who are building businesses now, right? And Hyderabad, for many of us, Hyderabad is a very interesting, almost eclectic mix of cultures, cuisines, and also businesses, right? So just talk us through a little bit about, first of all, nothing in your background, prior background, CA, CPA, etc., would suggest that there was this creative, urge to write and so on. But what triggered the whole thing? And first of all, what triggered the whole process of writing? And second is, why did you pick on having the theme around entrepreneurship when you wrote the book Mettle?
I had decided to take a break, in January 2020. And then in March 2020, COVID happened. So the world itself was at a different space at that time. I think it was therefore a quiet time, a time for introspection and giving wing to creativity. And writing was a great thing to do at that time. So I took a course in copywriting, and I was dabbling in content and copywriting. And then I hit upon the idea of this book, Mettle. The most interesting thing, I think, is that the first thing I thought of was the title of the book. I already decided that I'll write a book titled Mettle. And I wanted it to be an interview series. I love meeting and talking to people and finding out what really drives them, right? So that was the primary objective of the book. And then as I started listing down all the leading entrepreneurs in the city, both less known as well as well known, but leading large enterprises, who have made significant contributions, I realized that there is so many industries thriving in Hyderabad. And then to me, that was another story to be told. There is no book about Hyderabad's business journey, right? So I think there are two stories here. One is the stories of the people that I interviewed, and then the story of the city itself, which was a discovery process for me. And then I had fun, I think, bringing it out in this book.
So tell me something, so two questions related to this, right? So you said you did this course and then you thought of this theme. So two questions around that. A is, in terms of, did you ever, you started writing, you said in March 2020, or thereabouts. So did you, how long did it take? One. Second is, did you have writer's block anywhere during the period? Third, in terms of getting access to those people, right? Many of them are, obviously very busy people, etc. And here you are, a relatively unknown author at least.
Yes.
While, professionally, obviously, you've done a lot of good things. But as an unknown author, how easy or how difficult was it to get access to them? And I am asking that question because I think there's a lot of learning for many people. It's all, see, the journey you took is not dissimilar to the journey which an entrepreneur has, right? When you start something, you want to do something, and you have to get in front of people, right, who don't know you.
Correct.
You know them, they don't know you.
Correct.
But you have to get to them, right? So 3 questions: writer's block,
Yes.
how long did it take, and third is how do you get to them?
So I think the book, when I started it off, I actually thought it'll just be a 6-month thing, I'm going to finish this book, and it's like any entrepreneur, right? Like when you're excited about an idea, you think it's very easy to execute upon that idea because you're driven by the creative juices flowing within you. I did hit writer's block. It took 3 years to finish and launch. So there were obviously elements of highs and lows, and I adapted the book to finally get completed, right? Like initially it started as an interview series, and then I added the industrial aspect, which needed research and further interviews to get all the facts in. I think the writer's block was in terms of, when you keep rereading your book, right? You start wondering if it's good or not, the self-doubt, and then finally completing it and bringing it to the finish line and launching it. The last part actually took me much longer. It took me about 1.5 years to finish the manuscript, and then I gave it for feedback to 3-4 friends and people who read, and then I incorporated elements of the feedback, and it yet took 1+ year to launch after that. That was the hardest part, I think, the last mile of it. It had less to do with writer's block and more to do with the conviction in what I had put together. Right, and I think.
So how many drafts did you actually put together? Did you I remember when you read for example, many of these famous authors. They all tell you that, for example, I used to read a lot of Wodehouse and Ruskin Bond and Hemingway and all of those guys, and they used to say, listen, we had a routine. We'd get to work at a certain time, work through the day. And then at the end of it, many times we would just tear up everything and, start from scratch. Did you have to go through the same journey?
So first of all, you speak of, I think, great, literature authors, and this was not as hard, right? Several drafts still, right? At least 6 or 7 versions and multiple proofreading versions and so on. Like a typical accountant, I have if I open my Windows Explorer, there'll be draft, and then there'll be final, then there'll be final, and then there'll be finally the launch version. So several drafts for sure. I think I made it easy for myself because I was telling other people's stories. So I didn't have to come up with, so to speak, thinking through a story, right? And then struggling to write it. But it was more about how authentically can I represent the conversations. And therefore I stuck to a very, easy to read conversational tone in the book. It's like how you and I are talking. If I transcribe that, but then remove all the awkward pauses and, use the correct, fill in the blanks with things that they've told me, right? And then keep a consistent tone. So I think to that extent it was easy. The industrial part, I think for a layman, I've made it easy. I'm more convinced about that because I've had friends who have read it who have no interest in business context or, books like that, who have come and told me, hey, it was such an easy read and I want everyone to read it, which is why, I brought it in that format. So I think I lucked out in a few aspects, but it was still a journey. Yeah.
Sure. So, Poorvi, I think in the book, right, you talk about, for example, the early origins of industry, what started, then obviously it started with manufacturing, right, and then defense, right, you cover that, you cover the life sciences part. Then you talk about the services sector.
Yes.
Just talk us a little bit through that book, right? And also in terms of what you saw as you were, writing this. how did you see, the kind of like if you take a timeline and look at evolution, right?
Yeah.
How did you see that happen? One, and second is also in terms of obviously all these things don't happen in a vacuum. So there was policy, there
Yes.
was legislation, all of that, right? Just for the benefit of our readers, right? If you could just talk through some of those aspects.
So I think I've divided the book into like 6 key like industries, in Hyderabad, and it took some time to research them. The well-known ones, you'll find enough material, secondary research. But I was also interested in the trigger points for some of them, right? And there are people who have witnessed these firsthand. And also linking back to the access thing that you talked about earlier, I think it took long because I had to get access to some of these individuals. I had to connect with them, find out the stories, and since the industrial evolution are more fact-based, I had to put it in that format. There's an element of luck, right? When you're doing something, I think that you really believe in, people start connecting you. So I connected with the CII, I connected with other people I know. I worked with someone who was an editor of Hyderabad's business segment, who knew a lot about different elements that should be covered, first of all. And and then I connected with a lot of these individuals who are not even featured in the book, right? But I got stories from them about the city. So some were on a phone call, some were in person, and this was all through COVID. So I got to know about these key events and policies, right? So let me give a few examples. Today, right, the IT, ITES, and this whole startup, financial district, all of this is the new part of Hyderabad, which I've also witnessed firsthand myself. But then I met Mr. J. Chaudhary, who was able to give me perspective from the 80s and the 90s, in the license Raj phase, and how like technology revolution happened, right? And there were so many stages to it. Like even after High-Tech City was built, it was not easy to convince companies to come and do business here. You had to offer them incentives and free stuff, and they were still not convinced, right? So what did like the state do, for example, to enable that? Who were the first set of people who took a chance to come and start businesses here? And then you grow, right? The critical mass grows. Once the talent comes in, once people settle down, then there is more and more traction.
More like a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, it's those initial strides that are very, very difficult to make, right? So I think J. Chaudhary gave me those like really fabulous stories about IT, growth, which is there as a chapter. Then food and food processing, right? Dairy, like really the privatization of dairy itself was the first key step, right? To allow like private dairy to come in and flourish. Or poultry, right? There was nothing really, but the man who's credited with the poultry revolution for India, he started in Hyderabad. Although his business runs in Pune, he had origins in the city. Pharma and healthcare, like all the hospital chains that we have now that are homegrown, I mean, it was a difficult journey for many of them because at that time there was no, startup capital, there was no ready talent pool.
There was no ecosystem.
There was no ecosystem, right? And I think therefore they were all like change makers, those who started, in the 70s and 80s. But the city has embraced the diversity, right? There aren't a lot of areas where people have come and said, oh, this is not conducive in the city, let's go somewhere else, right? And that's the greatness, I think, of the city, which you discover when you see all the different industries that have flourished, like from defense to like food processing to, IT and pharma, biosciences. We have so many great educational institutions in the city, and that's where the talent pool comes from. That's where research and innovation happens, right? And they're across all the fields, from like agriculture to like life sciences to like technology, the triple IT, all of these, right? Great enablers for, businesses to flourish, right?
Sure. So quickly, Poorvi, if you could, the stories, right? You in the book,
Yeah.
written about 12 entrepreneurs whom you featured in the
10,
book. 10
yeah.
in the book, right? So two questions. One was, obviously every story in every one of those 10 is hugely inspiring, but which was the one which is really the most inspirational one? right? I don't want to put you in a spot,
Yeah.
but I think it'd be useful. And second is, how many of those were first generation entrepreneurs? Okay. And the third question around that is, I guess we keep talking about, the need for more gender diversity and having more women take up leadership roles and all of that, right? And I know you're a passionate advocate of that as well. So these three, if you could just quickly cover.
The most inspiring story, I would actually pin it to the quality, right? Like for me, humility was the characteristic that I think that I saw amongst all of the leaders. And to me, the most inspiring thing was humility, because here are people who have achieved so much and they're so down to earth and humble. And it was also because they gave access to me like an unknown author, right? Because they're so open, right? That they made it in life and they're so happy to share like their stories and give access to anybody who wants to hear them. I mean, Dr. Nageshwar Rao like stands out with LV Prasad Eye Institute, and he's a Padma Shri awardee, extremely humble, and he set out there to like, from the start there was an element of giving back, right, in his business model itself. It's about equitable eye care for everyone. It's about subsidizing and allowing people who cannot access it also access the quality care. So when I met him, I had goosebumps, because like what a visionary, right, in that sense. But
he's one founder whose name is not in the institute, but without him, the institute wouldn't have got to what it is today.
Yes.
So truly inspirational.
Yes. And some of the things he said were personally very fulfilling for me, right? Like he said that anything that anybody does in society is a contribution to society. Anything that you're doing, if you do it well, you're contributing to society. That, and he also said that those who bloom late bloom in full, right? And those things were like really different, from everything else that I had heard. And personally, somehow I felt very gratified by that.
Picking up on this, right? You said, the one characteristic across the board was the humility part, right? I'm sure there are other threads which were common.
Yes.
And for many of the young entrepreneurs who are listening or watching this podcast, if you were to say, listen, there are 5 things, which really stood out, which qualities which all these very successful entrepreneurs, demonstrate, live, on a daily basis.
Yes.
What were those 5 apart from humility?
Apart from humility, I would say discipline, conviction that what you're doing is absolutely necessary and it's impacting somebody or anybody's life, right? So conviction, passion, like to do it well, right? The passion for excellence. Then almost everybody said, don't run after fame or money, right? Like it's the thing that you're doing that matters the most. So
it's almost Bhagavad Gita like.
Yes.
So you said discipline,
conviction,
passion, focus on the work and not the
that
money
you're doing,
thing.
And
hustle?
No, not from them. But I think giving. All of them believe in giving back, like to your associates, right, your employees, to the community that you belong, to the people who surround you, right? The type of CSR work that everyone does, right? I had covered that as a question. And some of them were very connected to their hometown and would go back and do things there. Some of them would transform everything that they see around them, right? Like if you're living in a community, do something for them as well, right?
So how many of these 10 entrepreneurs did not have roots in Hyderabad and actually came in here and set up things?
Almost most of them were born in other places and cities and have set up like businesses here. Most of them, I would say, 70-80% of them.
So
they're from
one
Guntur.
other thing I wanted to ask you was, in terms of as you said, most of them came from outside, and obviously Hyderabad is a very welcoming kind of place. Maybe that doesn't get highlighted as much.
Yes.
In whatever. but it's almost like their Janma Bhumi may have been elsewhere, but their Karma Bhumi was here,
Yes.
and all of that. So in terms of did any one of them at any point say that it was hard because we were not from here, sort of thing? Did any one of them ever voice that?
No, actually. And I think that's what it is about the city, right? That many of them came here and tried their luck and they were able to make it, right? Some are like second generation entrepreneurs. But even so, for example, Sunil Dodla of Dairy, like he started Dairy from scratch. And his first base was Chennai, but he moved to Hyderabad. And then he's been very, very successful here. And many of them are like either from Guntur or, some other districts, but not like born and brought up here. I think the timing and the availability of talent pool, all of those things were also contributing factors. The time was right then, I think, for a lot of, let's say, pharma and hospitals and all of these to take off, right, at that point of time.
When opportunity meets talent.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about, the women entrepreneurs who are featured in the book, right? Could you just throw some light on that?
Yeah, so I think, unfortunately, I've featured only one woman entrepreneur, which is Vanita Dadla, but she's an amazing advocate of, women in leadership, women's equality, and all of that. There are many famous, I think, women leaders from Hyderabad. So to name a few, we have Sangeeta Reddy of Apollo, we have Sucharita Ella of Bharat Biotech, Mahima Dadla of Biological E, Anu Acharya of Map My Genome, Vani Kola, who set up Kalari Capital in Bangalore, but who has roots in Hyderabad. Amazing people, right? It was not easy to get access. I would have loved to feature like more of them in the book. But that doesn't deter like from the fact that it's a matter of pride, right? That there are so many women who are in all these different fields, right? And industries that may typically be male dominated, but they're able to, run successful enterprises. I think the representation has been steadily increasing, but there are strides that we can still make in this direction for women entrepreneurs.
That leads me to a follow-on question. What challenges, what will it take? For example, whenever you write your next book, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, one is access you talked about.
Yeah.
But let's assume that the next book would feature, may not be 10, but maybe 20. And let's assume that hypothetically we want to have 10 women featured in the book. What will it take, for the ecosystem to ensure that many more women start businesses, not just start, right, but also actually scale them and take them to create large scale impact.
The time couldn't be better for women, to do businesses, right? We have even the We Hub, which is state sponsored, exclusively focusing on women, and we have a lot more awareness about women entrepreneurs, right? Small or big or whatever the scale might be. You see like Humans of Bombay or Your Story constantly featuring without any gender bias, right? So you read about a lot of women who are also coming to the field. In general, I think for women to like be successful as entrepreneurs or in any career that they choose, right? I think the family support plays a huge role. From a large perspective, right, it's childcare and geriatric care. I think those are the two things that are gaps that if they're addressed will enable more women to be freely focused on the things that they want to pursue. So if you look at, you have business crisis to solve, you have to travel like for your work. These things, right, young children and old people at home. Those are two things that are constantly in your mind, right, when you're trying to juggle so many priorities. And there I feel women tend to take a bigger share of the burden, right? So if that eases for them, they can scale greater heights.
So it's not I guess one is, capability. I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah.
Maybe mindset sometimes.
Sometimes
yes. Sometimes I think they're diffident.
Yes.
And third, I guess, is this balancing
Yes.
the needs of home,
Yes.
either elders or young ones,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm now going to switch tracks a little bit, and two questions. One is in terms of you juggle many priorities, right? How do you do that? One question, and one more follow-up question on. I'm assuming there's another book coming up soon, right? And I'd like to get some understanding of what you're thinking about in the second book. And third is, what advice would you give young people, who want to go out and write, right? You started this journey of writing a couple of years ago, but I can see perceptibly that there's a second book in the offing. So yeah, 3 questions.
So first, on how do I balance it all? I think I take inspiration from women who have done it, right? Couple of years ago, when my husband was working, the president of the company was a woman, and she went on to have her 3rd child. She's gone on to have a 4th child as well, right?
Wow.
And has an amazing career trajectory. I've seen, or when I've met Vanita, or many other inspiring women leaders that I meet in corporate, right? I take inspiration from them, first of all. Second of all, I think you have to tell yourself that you're capable of doing all of these things, right? Your self-talk has to be that it's possible, right? Then the motivation comes automatically. Personally, I don't like to be very easy on myself. I like to have goals. I like to have lots of things to accomplish, and get up every day and look forward to those things, right, to do. Because that somehow gives me joy to know that I can do so many things. When you are doing them and when you're committed to them, the ecosystem around you will start supporting you. And by that, it's mostly family, right? So if you think that you have to be there to provide every meal with your own hands, right? Or that you have to be there at the bus stop to send your kids off to school every morning, maybe you're going to limit yourself, right? Because you could have used that time for something else. So you start enabling people to be a little more independent. And then people will start supporting you when they see that you're very serious about the things that you're pursuing. So I pursue health and fitness. I like to sing, dance, and then I do my work well, the office work, and then run the home, right? Because there are some things that you just have to do anyway at home. You're raising children. I have 2 daughters, and I want them to also know that everything is possible if, first of all, you decide that it's possible, and then you decide, right, where to let go, where to delegate, where to take a back seat, right, so that you can still do all the things that you want to do. And I like waking up early in the morning. I think that's gives you a lot of time to plan your day and get those morning hours to do what you really want to do. That's part 1 of how do I juggle all of these. 2 was about what is the next book about. So it's been, first of all, very heartwarming when people call up or write to me and text me and say, hey, what's the next book about? Because, this is the first one and it was an experiment, right, to see what's possible, right, in terms of writing. I do have a few ideas. I would say I've not zeroed in. Mettle represents resilience, right, and there are many stories of resilience. So if you take themes, today there are so many people who are battling with mental issues, right, teenagers and youth. When they have overcome that, they have stories to tell. There are people, the families, let's say, of people who are battling with cancer, right, it's hard for them as well, right, to deal with that disease and, life changing after that, right. They also have to be resilient. The story is not just of the survivor, but of the family that's coped with it. There can be women leaders, right, or women entrepreneurs as a theme. There are so many stories that need to be told, right. So Mettle as a theme can actually cover so many. Apart from this, I think I'm also passionate about financial literacy. I think there's a lot of content out there, but there is still more to be learned, right? I think of youth, how are they going to deal with finances? Or women, right? How aware and savvy are they with finances, right? Even during COVID, I used to think about that. A lot of people were suddenly widowed, right? Or a lot of families lost family members. And then people are struggling to keep together what already belongs in the family because of a lack of awareness, right? People don't write wills, right? So around financial literacy, because I'm a finance professional, like there are some things that I have in mind. I've written some blogs about it, but maybe some of these are themes that I have in mind for what's coming up. Okay. And the third thing was about advice to young writers, right? If you're young, I would just say, just get started, right? Like, don't think twice. Don't think about the audience and don't think about perfection in what you're doing, because as with everything else, I think you only get better with practice. So get that first one out, right? Put it out there in the world, which is what even I have done. We are in a lucky space because there's a lot of free content and knowledge out there. Today, if you want to write a book and if you open Google and YouTube, right, there is so much that'll tell you about how to go about it, the process, the tools, right? So just use that, right? Use all the free stuff that's out there, but get started and don't wait for perfection.
Okay, one last question, Poorvi. So with things like ChatGPT and all coming, right? So, obviously one question would be, will something like that influence writing? Okay, will there still be room for creative, for creative thinking and all of that, right? I'm sure there will be, but it would be great to get a writer's perspective on it.
I think ChatGPT is,
or some form of AI.
Whatever form of like generative AI that's coming up now, right? Great benefits, right? All technology comes with benefits. So when there are things like you have to draft a letter, you have to plan an itinerary, you have to do things that require searching multiple places and then putting the words together, right? I think this is great for all of that, right? But creativity has to be original. When you're writing something, let's say it's a story or a piece of fiction, or you're bringing together stories of people. I, as a writer, would personally not want to, take shortcuts like that, because there's an element of your emotion that you add when you write, right? And the technology will give you a right set of words for sure, but you will add your own emotion when you're writing it yourself. And I think emotion is at the heart of everything that needs to be told, right, as a story. So I think that element cannot be taken away, should not be taken away. And to readers and writers, I would say watch out for that, right?
So Poorvi, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure and honor to talk to you. Looking forward to the next book, and wishing you all the very best. And I think it's it's the fact that you've chosen Hyderabad, and you've chosen the story of 10 homegrown entrepreneurs, right? Something which requires a lot of appreciation, right? So thank you, and look forward to many more great books in the offing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MSR, for this opportunity, for doing this at T-Hub. I think it's a great finishing line to my book, right? That's how I see it. Thank you so much. Very grateful.
Thank you.